colleagues and listeners, here we are, and we're on episode 5 of a nice series with Matthew Vaughan, who's the Director of Aviation Security and Cyber, and also Emergency Management. Matthew, last one, here we are, number 5, and the title of this one is Supporting Air Cargo Logistics National Visions. Now, there's a lot of things that we can bring underneath that, under that banner, but I think one of the things that's so important now, and especially whilst our industry is coming under a lot of pressure now with regards to recruitment, with attrition levels, with, why should people come into the business, with all the things that we should be doing to help them get in and stay in and want to be part of the future. And it looks like everything that we're doing is diluting the actual solution even more and more. So should we not now return back to basics? And instead of just straightforward T's and C's that people are slinging around everywhere with 6%, 7%, 8% sign-on fees, year-old fees and stuff, should we now not start looking at a company's purpose and a company's values so that anybody who's out there, obviously they've got to earn to live, but the way they live then becomes almost the most important or the overriding factor. So, why would you go and work for a company? And if you get into that company or people in there or you do your research and they're not supporting the climate as best as possible, because I think to be seen to be too green is a trendy thing and it's a fad. It's not going to last, okay? Because the realities of looking after the climate, you need profit, you need people, and then you can start focusing on the planet. You can't do it the other way around. And so just to throw it at you, do you not think now that companies should be a little bit smarter and start aligning their purpose and values to what people want?
So there's a lot in there, of course. And if I just start with aviation as a sector first, and then we can bleed into the other aspects. But the fact that you've got half the industry that in a lot of ways was nationalized in the last few years, right? In terms of government support, and nationalized in a way that either the employees were, compensated for lack of work or just unavailability of the industry, or the corporations that operate within aviation were compensated by government. So to your point, as we come out of that and pay back some of those revenues in whatever time that's going to take, by implication, you therefore attract not only a P&L responsibility, a bottom line type responsibility, but you've got the whole social responsibility piece in terms of the way those organizations should be cooperating and laying out agendas that are linked to their brand identity, and of course one of those agendas, no doubt, is around the environment. Right. And making sure that what you do is sustainably measured and viable and so on. I heard a really interesting anecdote recently, again within the aviation context. Got no idea if it's true or not, but it was an anecdote that sort of stuck. And New York to London one way, you would need to a household of 3 bedrooms would need to recycle for 4.5 years for one flight to offset today's sort of aviation footprint versus what you can do at a domestic level to recycle. So if that anecdote is actually true, and I've got no way to verify it, I just heard it in an interview, then there's big road ahead, but got to start somewhere, right? And I think we're at that point.
Yeah, but that's also why I'm saying that you get. Don't get me wrong. The planet, of course, it's important.
Yeah.
Okay, but people just jumping on the bandwagon and not caring about how to get where it should be, etc., and finger pointing and blaming. At the end of the day, travel is there because we need to travel. So that's going to stay. Now, how often, how for how long, and what benefits, etc. It's wrong for people just to be standing on a podium and finger pointing and doing stuff like that. But the realities, and what you said there, you're not sure whether that's true or not. Some of the facts, that has to be established so that those facts are accurate. Because even with cars, electric cars, and you've got hybrids. Well, some of the hybrids are more harmful than any diesel or petrol because of the size of the batteries and the mix. And then we don't know what's going to happen with the batteries at the end of their life cycles. And there's all sorts of things that aren't clear yet. So people should be a little bit careful. But you mentioned the word sustainability. If we don't have sustainability of business, you're not going to have sustainability of the planet, because people will just be, going off all over the place. So we've got to focus firstly on people so they understand what the objectives are and that people are working in the right perspective. But then it needs profit, because if you've got profit, you can do certain things. If you haven't got profit, then the basics don't even get done. So before the planet gets resolved, we've got to have a nice balance on people awareness and understanding and profitability. And then coming back to what we're saying here about individuals, I think now companies should start to be focusing a lot more on their values, on their purpose, so that they can start to get the right people for the right reasons, who not only are aware that they need to work to live, but if they work in the right environment and their conscience and their values and everything else aligns, it's not all about money then, Matthew.
Yes, you're spot on. If you're lucky enough to arrive at something like that, where I certainly feel lucky myself. I'm doing something that I truly believe in, and could be doing some or part of this work even if I wasn't being compensated for it, right? So
don't let Nick hear you say that, though.
No, you're right. You're right. I won't pass it on. But what I'm trying to say is the majority, there's obviously a large group of people out there that don't feel that way, right? And they are literally working to live. And for whatever reasons, right? We've all got individual circumstances that sort of govern that. But the difference between kind of packing biscuits versus traveling and using aviation, identified as a luxury item, by the way, right? You don't have to travel by aviation internationally. There are other solutions to it, and the same thing applies in the air cargo, the sort of cargo supply chain, right? It doesn't have to be the air cargo piece, but for me, as long as there are alternatives available for each, and again, linking that back to this session around national logistics, national plans, national sort of options to ensure that you support, both profitability, economic responsibility, and things like that. It's diversification of the transport sector overall, and making sure that there are availabilities there, no matter what your preference is. I'll go back to using the city that I just moved to, 20 minutes away from work, and I had 4 different transport options to get to that at 4 different prices at 4 different times, and all the different bits with it. And that's just one small little city that is invested in that particular infrastructure. So those choices alone empowered me as an individual to feel better about my, you might be thinking, wow, this guy's got to get a life. I mean, he's excited about surface transport options, but the broader point I'm trying to make is linking that to a national economy. You need that diversity of transport.
Yeah, but also, Matthew, coming back again to something that I think we spoke about briefly or touched on it in one of the other episodes, is the media and press and politics have got a big part to play, because they can throw a negative slant as well as a positive slant as well as a neutral slant. And some of the information, and we also spoke about false information, etc. Some of the information that's fed to people about, why does somebody fly in a private jet? Okay, well, firstly, if you're in a private jet, it's for the individual anyhow, especially coming out of COVID, it's safer. Okay, and then also it's quicker. And if they are that influential and that important and that capable, they can get so much done in that amount of time, whereby they can fly somewhere and get back, you know, rather than any other means. That to me makes sense. If it's somebody just doing it because they didn't want to get on a train or they didn't want to do whatever, that's a different matter. But the actual true data, so you can trust the data, that's something that I think everybody should start to want and to demand, so that people can make a more calculated decision against it. But I had somebody last week who said to me, you should only fly if you're surrounded by water.
Okay.
So I'd like to see the whole of Europe deciding, right, no more aircraft. We're going to go everywhere by train or by motorway, which a lot of them did when there was different openings and closures on borders and everything. But you know, there's so much that needs to go into this, but it needs to get the accurate data up front, and to stop the press and media giving so many, you know, just for the sake of making news. It's not good anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I also think there's a bit of a tendency that if you're an organization that's involved in some positive R&D around trying to make more sustainable decisions, right? You know, aircraft cabin waste for an example, right?
Yeah.
By communicating that you're undergoing that R&D or that pilot, it really is just limited to that. You know, it's got to be communicated in a way that it really is limited to that point in time and those set of outcomes. And it's not this broad, you know, holistic organizational level of activity that's taking place. And to your point, it's spun or twisted in a way that oh wow, look, you know, look at these guys, they're fully environmentally ready and you know, taking on all the goals and all the things that are attached to it. So
and planting trees that nobody knows will survive one winter or the next.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I do agree with you on a personal front. Like I keep saying, I'm much more comfortable in the security tracks, but yeah, the environment no doubt is important, and specifically within aviation, as there is, you pointed out, there's so much negative or disinformation or unfactual pieces of information out there that you know, do travelers and, you know, forwarding agents, do they make decisions based on how green the logo is? You know, I don't know,
Matthew, exactly. And also the same level of sometimes twisted or exaggerated or stretched truths from the media affects the way people respond. But it's the same thing with safety and security. If a story is written in a certain way, you'll get up in arms about it and worried about it. And then we spoke earlier about, you know, trusting organizations that have data and what they do with that data and whether or not they've got the capability to analyze the data and use it for the benefit of whatever the purpose was in the first place. So, you know, I think I personally think now, and we're talking about, you know, national visions and we're talking about governments and regulators, they've got a responsibility to start making certain truths be made aware to people, so that at the same time, if you're aware, you're also going to understand what's going to happen if you don't do certain things correctly. And I think now, whether it's IATA or ICAO, whether it's any other body, okay, they need to start giving directives of shalls and wills, okay, and if other parties don't follow it, then openly report that, so people can see who's not and why they're not.
Yeah.
You know, and then you've got a more balanced debate, but at least people should then follow their own conscience and their own values.
Yeah, I mean, the case, there's a really good case in China of again, just stay within the aviation world, and I can raise this because it's on a public URL, and if you happen to be able to read Mandarin, you'll be able to access this and you know, see the information. But they have a declining rate of unruly disruptive in cabins of aircraft, because they nationally publish an offenders list.
Yeah, that's it.
right? So the I think you call it naming and shaming, right? The
Yeah,
publicly getting it out there and leveraging the shame to achieve compliance. Now, again, in a sort of air cargo security logistics kind of world, could that be something that's applied? And I think we spoke about this previously in the context of lithium batteries and
yep.
disincentivizing certain forwarders or certain shippers that are just not following the regulations or adhering to some of those safety standards. Could that be done at a universal level, or is it an operator level? Yeah, I mean, these things all need to be sort of looked at.
That's the best endorsement of a just culture you can find, Matthew.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know what I'm saying? So that should be at the highest level possible. And anybody with that information should be able to add to it. Obviously, it needs to be validated and verified, but I think why not? And the thing that you said about China, I'll definitely go on there. My Mandarin's a little bit basic, but I will try and remember. But that's also where they seen on the press where they were shaming, people who were not following COVID rules as well.
Very true. Yes. Yeah. And there are, rabbit holes of all kinds of, political theory that we could go down and examine the merits of that. But, and, the reasons why COVID has sort of brought to the surface some of these sort of hidden preferences around, and of course health has just been used as a vehicle to demonstrate some of that, right? So but I think overall to sort of get that back on point around what do you need to be doing to support national visions, it links to one of the previous sessions, right? It's security and safety as adding commercial value. The days of that being overhead cost or sunken operating cost, those perceptions need to be shifted and can actually enable higher levels of facilitation that's both secure and safe.
Yeah, 100%. And again, awareness, education, and just normal common sense that needs to be used a lot more than it has been in the past. And COVID has given everybody an opportunity to look back, and they say never waste a good crisis. Well, this is the best opportunity to look back and say, right, we could have, would have, should have, we didn't. Now let's do it right. Let's change and let's do things the way they should have been done.
Yeah, I mean, COVID had the whole surge capacity. It's still dealing with how you manage surge capacity, the prevalence of the whole life sciences sort of supply chain that went with that, and how sophisticated that actually is. And I'm pretty sure, I'm starting to repeat myself, but I spoke in the early days of regulators wanting to regulate that, and we were kind of like, hold on, time out. You clearly don't understand the supply chain if that's what you think we need to be doing, and second, X-raying cold storage, that's not a solution here, right? So that's not a security solution. So it's the balance of that policy, that national policy, which, to the earlier point in our discussion, just because you hear it in the media or you read it in the media, that does not transform into national policy. And that's the truth. And that's the truth. In some jurisdictions, you can actually see that. And e-commerce is a great example where you might have an air cargo national vision, and then you've got e-commerce sitting out here on the left, right? And that's that's just not recommended in the way that the e-commerce needs to integrate.
Yeah, it's allowing one team to play with different rules.
Yeah,
and different rules, different stadium, and different supporters, but being put in the same league table. It doesn't make sense. Another thing, just to end with, Matthew, and I think something that we can probably bring into our wrap-up session, which is the last and final one. But worst case scenario, You know, risk assessment, risk we know is so important. Emergency response planning, crucial. You've got emergency management on your on your portfolio of responsibility as well. But so many people missed out on worst case scenario. Now, even when they get the chance to look back on how they dealt with the COVID situation and others, an awful lot of mistakes, So that's an area that people need to focus on, and none more than safety and security as far as worst case scenarios.
Yeah, the basic human condition, it's not how you fall, it's how you get up, and we've got very short memories, and any of those pandemic playbooks, evidently they weren't used. But the counter argument is, it was an existential type event, so there probably wasn't a boilerplate that you could pull out and go, that's the plan we need to enact. And to go back to the whole cockpit analogy that we spoke of before, it's we're kind of moving on from this scenario based SOP type training, right, which helps reduce the level of surprise and unpredictability, right? So we're moving from this sort of just continue to simulate bird strikes over and over and you'll get better, right? You now need to pivot towards risk is risk. It's going to happen. You need to know how to manage surprise, continue your operation, but deal with the surprise almost simultaneously at the same time. And and the only way to do that is to default back to what you said, Chris, is developing values and principles around the competencies that you need to be able to manage the surprise, but continue to do your business at the same time.
Yep, continuity, contingency, and like say the three, like you said about using the cockpit principle, but I think one of the classics is PPE. There was such a mad rush and a panic for PPE. They let standards go out the window. They let procurement go out the window. Now they're tasked with who did what, were they correct? Look at all the PPE that's sitting around the world now because it's not of the right standard, and people paid a fortune for it, which is mad. Which comes back to the 4Fs. And
very
the
true
thing was those 4Fs were more prevalent than ever during this period of reflection. And that shows how fragile it all is, which is part of your responsibility. And the one thing that I think managers and if they were in your position, or if they were responsible for the company's accountability, would they be able to put their head on the pillow every night and say, do you know something? We've done as much as we can. We've got no problems. We're happy with our dashboards. Would they say that if they were the ones who are totally accountable for it? And there's not many people who would. And if that's the case, then there's an awful lot more that should be done.
Yeah, you're spot on, Chris. I know we're wrapping up. I'll just take a personal note. The whole issue around conflict zones, for example, right? The shoot down in July 2014, and then you had a similar or different sort of circumstances in January 2020 in Tehran. As an association guy that works for IATA, and we put out standards and guidance and we help moderate policies and all that sort of thing, I absolutely take it to heart that the KPI I'm working towards is no more accidental shoot downs of civil aviation aircraft, right? That's my KPI. And we've got tensions in that part of the world playing out again, with some pretty nasty battle station weaponry kind of thing that's in place, and you only need to go onto flight radar, and there's only a few airlines, sadly, tragically, flying into and over Ukraine at the moment.
But right? You said there earlier about accidental shoot downs. The translation of what accidental is also something. So
absolutely,
for their own worst case scenario and their own risk assessment, Matthew, they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some of the cases, the state removed the risk assessment capability and simply just said, prohibition, you're not flying.
Yep.
right? Which comes back to what we were talking about in terms of social responsibility and
Exactly.
finding the middle point between that sort of governance and operator risk assessment.
Yeah, doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I leave it there because that's something that I'm sure it's one of your regular sayings, doing the right thing for the right reasons at the right time. But listen, fair play to you. You've got a hell of a task there, a hell of a set of responsibilities, and a lot of respect for you, Matthew. And always enjoyed our days together in the Middle East. We had some
definitely.
We had some challenging times, but we also had a certain amount of humour around it and reality. But listen, I'm looking forward to the wrap up. So we'll do that very shortly. And thank you very much for your valuable time.
Yeah, appreciate it, Chris. Like we said, it's been a while to try and set this kind of discussion up, but really happy with the format and the way that we've gone about the topic. So yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, and look forward to the last one. Thanks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks again. Cheers.